The Nelson Mandela Foundation says recent unrest in the country was a long time coming. It says the incarceration of the former president, Jacob Zuma, was merely a trigger for the built-up rage caused by a number of socio-economic inequalities. The statement comes as we today observe Nelson Mandela International Day, which marks the birth anniversary of the former president. Madiba is celebrated around the world for his fight against poverty, inequality, social and cultural injustice. For 67 years, he not only devoted his life to the service of the nation, but in a way for the whole world to come together. Sello Hatang is the Chief Executive Officer of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and he joins us now. A very good evening to you, Mr. Hatang, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So I'd just like to go back to that statement that I mentioned in my introduction. Obviously very sad events over the past couple of days, but you say they were a long time coming. Tell us, why does the foundation say this, and is it saying that it's not surprised that we saw the scenes that we saw?
Well, we might have been surprised by the scale, and good evening again, Tsepiso. We might have been surprised by the scale, but not only the Nelson Mandela Foundation, many others of our stakeholders have warned that our levels of inequality are unsustainable. If you look at studies that were done by Mapungubwe, for example, they all came to the conclusion this is unsustainable. Kathrada Foundation has been saying the same thing, that you can't continue as if that this is normal. A country where you have so many young people who are unemployed and are fast losing hope. We've been saying, like they have all been saying the same thing, to say that for as long as we have corruption at the level that we do, for as long as we have a state that doesn't seem to care about its young, for as long as we have poverty that's hitting many, like it's been just raging, where there are many communities where you find that their families go to bed hungry, and those numbers are increasing. Mm-hmm. Now, with the recent unrest, what it means is that tomorrow, being Monday, many will be unemployed. Many will just wouldn't know where to go to get help. Which is why this Mandela Day was really a significant one, one where all of us should have just banded together in order to try deal with what's coming. If it's not there already for many families.
So we'll talk about the significance of the day and what you've done in just a moment, but you as a foundation talk about destructive energy, but you also say the willingness of those who call themselves supporters of former President Zuma to weaponize identities and invite mayhem became that earth tremor setting off the tidal wave. But I'm curious, does that mean that as a foundation you see these supporters as being the spark that lit the fire, or did this happen concurrently with these food riots, so-called food riots?
No, I think it's true to say that there was a spark, and the spark was the detention of the former president. Now, what it meant is that all you needed was just a few of those people who support or call themselves his supporters, who then just sparked it, made sure that it then would destabilize everything else. What would happen, and we've heard this over and over, from people who, for example, guarding Maponya Mall, they said that what you saw is a car would arrive with people inside, and they just started. All they needed was just to start breaking into the shop, and the community around then followed suit, because most of those people who are sitting there, they see these shops as most of them having supported them, having helped them. There's no justification for someone like Ilokwati, for example, to have lost his shop. His foundation has done a lot to help those communities around. And I'm singling him out because I know him. But all those shops that were broken into, every one of those people has been helping those communities around. So it tells you that the spark was just that the detention of the former president. But may I remind you, also, Tsepiso, that may we not forget that in 2008, We had the unrest that was caused where people then attacked non-nationals. Similarly in 2012. So in a violent democracy like ours, all you need is a reason or an excuse that people get. Violence breaks out and people then attack shops, and they attack. In the past, it was just spaza shops, which were owned by foreign nationals. So that's the nature of our democracy, and we have to work hard to change that. So we can't accept it as the norm.
We'll talk about how to change that in just a moment, but I do also want to highlight the fact that the foundation has also pointed an accusing finger at government, saying that it has been paying lip service to the reckoning with oppressive and traumatic past that we have. But do you see these failures as beginning in 1994, or was it thereafter?
It started way back in 1994. You'd remember that people like Ntate Dumisani Ntsebeza, people like Terry Bell, they have always been saying, we have unfinished business. Let's deal with that unfinished business. The attacks that are happening in Phoenix, for example, are telling us something about ourselves. They are saying, hold the mirror closely. And you'll see that South Africa has an ugly face of racism that needs to be reckoned with. That our poverty and inequality is unsustainable. And all these things started with from 1994. We can't say that it started only with the last 10 years of the former President Zuma. I think in that case, we are now hiding behind that mismanagement that then happened. Of course, it escalated problems that were there because issues of identity, race and identity, that's not new. It's not something that happened around the former president's time. It's stuff that we could have reckoned with. Kulumani support group has been saying, please reckon with that kind of unfinished business, because it will come back to bite us.
And that's very laudable in the sense that that means the foundation admits that your patron, former President Nelson Mandela, presided over this. You spoke about it as a violent democracy, which is interesting. It's a contradiction in terms, isn't it? So the question is, what can we do? Has there been a silver lining from these events that we saw in the past couple of days? And how have they been expressed in the activities you took part in today?
You know, maybe if we look at land, because it's the subject matter that we tend to discuss more about, you'd remember that Madiba had a target that he had thought that by the time he retires in 1999, at least 30% of the land would have been handed back. Madiba had to admit that that didn't happen. And it's something that we can't run away from. So as we look at these things that are happening in our country, we must then say they have a root cause. And we must then say, how do we then uproot them? You look at what we're doing today in Soweto. So we went to Soweto and we started off at Ikageng, which is a center that looks after particularly orphans, people who run child-headed households. And we are hoping to support just over 500 families in Soweto alone. Because of the funding that we got just for that area. And I think it's important that as we deal with the issue of food, to know that it's not new in South Africa. But even after 1994, we didn't knock it back to deal with issues of stunting. I grew up as a child knowing that when my mother walks through the door, there was a particular look on her face that I knew that today we were not going to eat. And it can't be right. That's why most of us then always think we don't want those who are now living to then go through the past that we went through, where it's their present reality. But we have forgotten as leaders. Most of our leaders have forgotten and moved on. And I think it's important that we reckon with that. We went also to clean up the shops that were damaged and clean up the rubble that was there. And I think if we are to think of what Archbishop Tutu once said, he liked saying that for him, South Africans have made littering a sport. And if we are to leave those things just like that, it means that we're going to have an environment that will be damaged forever. So we then planted 67 trees as well, again, to deal with issues of climate change. So that's all inclusive to try and change the future for the better.
As a foundation, what do you think you can do on the issue of leadership? I'm thinking about the social compact, which the state seems to be failing to keep, or even have one that is credible enough for people to believe they are seeing leadership in governance. You also speak about conspicuous consumption that we're seeing in the nation against the backdrop of spiraling inequality. But there are people who probably would say, I deserve this, upward mobility, I've worked hard, but yet it's okay to leave others behind in a poverty trap. What kind of leadership would deal with those failures?
I think it starts with what the Foundation's board decided on last year, that our approach to dealing with current challenges in South Africa will be about social bonding. For social bonding to work, where you think democracy, for democracy to stick, it must be seen to be working for the majority. And at the moment, our democracy is not working for the majority. And I think that until such time that we then make democracy stick in that sense, the rule of law is another element where we always expect that to work when it has an impact on the poor. But the elite don't think that it applies to them too. So if we are to do anything in terms of leadership, is to always try and have decisive leadership. That's why the NMF has been running these workshops with the help of the IDC, where we are trying to then say, how do we ensure that the next generation of leaders are better? And this, by the way, is not just political leadership. We shouldn't always be focused on political leaders. It should also be about looking at how do we change the way we do things in civil society, the way we do things in a community setup. So that's what we need to then be focused on to try and change the direction of where we go.
You've been out helping child-headed households who are unfortunately growing up without hope. You shared your own experiences about that. We spoke earlier on about the fact that we live in a violent democracy. How do we ensure that we imbue that sense of nation and peace building in these young children who are growing up without hope?
Yeah, that's the difficult part. And that's why it needs to be a joint effort by all of us. It can't be expected of the president alone. It can't be expected of the governing party alone. It can't be expected of politicians in general. It needs to then be a joint effort to make sure that we change the traumatic experiences that young ones are going through. That's why our early childhood development program is precisely about that, making sure that no child is left behind. So that's why we launched a program where we're looking at how do we make sure that we include everybody who's feeling excluded, those who are feeling that they are the wretched of the earth, as it were, the ones who democracy forgot about. And it's that kind of work that we need to do. We will be working a lot more in the Eastern Cape, where we'll be at the Winnie Madikizela Mandela District Municipality to try and formalize most of those ECD centers. You as the viewer, you have a responsibility to find a niche. How can I help? Find a spot where you can also just have an impact on the life of another one. And Tate Bonang Mohale talks about lifting as we rise. I think that concept of lifting as you rise should be something that is a lived reality for all of us. And I'm pleading with all the viewers. It's one thing to be critical of others. It's quite another for you to also just lend a helping hand. It's one thing to then run to Twitter and point out where others are making mistakes. It's quite another for you to then carry the responsibility to say, how do I contribute towards building a democracy that's more peaceful, that's more calm, that's not as violent to those who are still to be born?
Thank you for that. Thank you for speaking to us. Sello Hatang is the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. You've heard his impassioned plea to you at home to do your part to help lift our society, our communities from this spiraling inequality, the violence that is so pervasive in our everyday lives, but just also to create a better world for you and I. And we all know somebody who is stuck in that poverty trap. It's your family member. What are you doing? Tell us, share with us this evening what you've been doing for Nelson Mandela International Day. Please tell us about your community and if others can help in helping you.